Greetings photography pals, and today I'm checking out a brand new portrait lens from Samyang, which they rather quietly launched onto the market a few weeks ago, the Samyang AF 135mm f1.8 FE. It's for Sony's E-mount cameras, full frame or APS-C, and its price of $1,000 or £800 here in the UK is potentially very good value for money for such an ambitious autofocus lens. It undercuts the price of Sigma's similar offering and is half the price of Sony's own 135mm f1.8. So, if this Samyang lens is good enough, it could be bargain of the century, and I simply love lenses like this for portrait, subject and event photography. The maximum aperture of f1.8 is as bright as it gets for an autofocus 135mm lens, letting in plenty of light for shooting indoors or in the dark, and more importantly, getting dramatically out of focus backgrounds, even when you're shooting a bit further away from your subject. This is an absolutely perfect lens for classic portrait photography. I'd like to thank Samyang's UK distributor for loaning me this lens for a couple of weeks for testing, although as usual, this is a totally independent review. Let's take a look at its build quality first. As you can see, this lens is bulky. It's made with quite a lot of plastic in its body and actually feels a little bit hollow, a little bit lightweight, although the advantage there is that it's less of a burden to carry around with you. It's built on a metal lens mount with a very narrow weather sealing gasket around the edge. We get a few controls on the side here. There's an autofocus hold button, and just below that, a switch for the large rubberized manual focus ring. This lets you change it to adjust your camera's aperture instead of focus if you like, and the aperture changes smoothly, which is useful for video work. And below that, you also get a focus limiter switch. The manual focus experience is lovely on this lens. The focus ring turns very smoothly, and the focus motor works responsively and precisely with the focus ring. However, as you can see here, the lens does display a fair bit of focus breathing, zooming in rather as you focus more closely. When you're shooting in single shot mode, the lens's autofocus motor is a little slow, but mostly accurate, and it works silently and smoothly. When shooting in continuous autofocus, things speed up, although I found that it does miss focus just occasionally, maybe 2 or 3% of the time. Most of the time on my A7R III, the lens was happy with eye autofocusing, but it would miss a little sometimes. The lens comes with a basic soft cloth bag and a deep plastic lens hood with a rubber trim around the front. Overall, the build quality is absolutely fine and it works really well, although as I said, the autofocus motor would miss occasionally, just a little. Alright, let's move on and look at image quality now. I'll start by testing it on a full frame camera, my 42 megapixel Sony A7R III. In-camera corrections are turned on. Straight from f1.8, the lens is absolutely razor sharp in the middle of your images with excellent contrast, and the image corners just as good. A frankly incredible performance, easily as sharp as Sony's own 135mm f1.8 lens. Stop down to f2.8 and you might be able to catch just a tiny smidgen of extra resolution here if you look incredibly closely. Fantastic. The lens stays this sharp down to f11, and even f16 looks pretty good, although at f22, diffraction takes its toll, softening the image a little. Ultimately though, 10 out of 10 here, a really exemplary performance. Let's put it onto an APS-C camera now, my little Sony A5100, and, well, it's the same result, razor sharp straight from f1.8 in the middle of the image and into the corners also. It stays this sharp down to f11, although on a denser APS-C sensor, diffraction kicks in a little earlier now at f16, softening the image again. But at the end of the day, there's no stopping the relentless effects of diffraction, so again, it's a flawless performance here. Okay, let's take a look at distortion and vignetting. You might find this hard to believe, but I did indeed turn off in-camera corrections for these pictures. The lens displays almost imperceivable distortion and vignetting, even at f1.8. Stop down to f2.8, and any vignetting that was there is now gone. Another handy feature of the lens is its ability to focus down to a very close 69 centimeters for getting shots of smaller subjects, which is lots of fun. Most camera lenses get a bit softer at close distances or see increased colour fringing, or both. Impressively though, this Samyang lens sees zero image degradation close-up, continuing to be extraordinarily sharp straight from f1.8. Let's see how well the lens performs against bright lights. Just an average performance here. We don't see much in the way of flaring, but some glaring is visible, even when the light source is slightly outside the picture, so using that deep lens hood that it comes with will be advantageous when shooting with bright lights around you. When very bright lights are right in the middle of your picture, some clear halos are visible, as you can see here, but they're nothing particularly offensive. Now let's take a look at the quality of this lens's bokeh. Those autofocus backgrounds almost always look nice and smooth. The lens would need an apodization filter to look any better than this. We do get the usual cat's eye shape to specular highlights in the image corners when shooting wide open, but it's no worse than usual for a lens of this type. And finally, related to bokeh comes longitudinal chromatic aberration. Samyang have missed a trick here. They could quite legitimately have labelled this lens as being apochromatic, as we barely see any colour fringing on bokeh highlights here, even when shooting at f1.8. Stop down to f2.8 and any hint of colour fringing is long gone. Overall, well, if you own a Sony E-mount camera and you're on the market for anything even remotely like this camera lens, then pause the video right now, get online and order one. Just do it. Don't even think twice. The only excuse for not buying this camera lens is if you're dead or in jail, and if you're in jail, break out. The Samyang AF 135mm f1.8 FE is worth every penny of its $1,000 or £800 asking price. Any mild misgivings I might have had about its build quality are belied by its stellar optics and great value for money. It does have a couple of more expensive competitors though. Shall we take a quick look at them? The Sigma 135mm f1.8 Art, a bit of an older lens now, which was originally released for digital SLR cameras, and Sony's also excellent 135mm f1.8 G Master. All three lenses are razor sharp from corner to corner on a full frame camera, even when shooting at f1.8, so there's no real difference in resolution between them. Seriously, I checked my old test pictures for you. All three lenses produce similarly soft bokeh too. The advantage of the Sigma lens is probably its very high build quality combined with its reasonable price, although really it's an older design now for digital SLRs, meaning that it's just been adapted onto Sony E-mount, making it a rather gigantic and heavy lens, and its autofocus system won't work as smoothly also. The advantages of the Sony lens are its potentially useful aperture ring, which can be handy for video work, and also its autofocus is the most efficient and accurate of the three lenses. Both of those expensive lenses are absolutely incredible, but there's no denying that the Samyang lens has advantages of its own. Although it doesn't have the toughest build quality, it's far lighter than the other two, particularly the Sigma, which makes it less of a chore to use and carry around with you. It can focus more closely than the other two, also, with sharper close-up image quality. The only disadvantages of the Samyang lens are that its autofocus is slightly less reliable than a Sony, and it has very slightly worse flaring than the other two. But ultimately, its impressively low price make those issues perfectly forgivable, and if you haven't figured it out by now, this lens comes highly recommended. Gah, I wish I could have kept that lens instead of giving it back to Samyang after testing it. It's one of the best they've ever made. I want to say a big thank you to all my supporters over on Patreon who are making such a difference to keeping these lens reviews going. Thank you. If you haven't already, then check out the link in the description below to find out more and to get all kinds of exclusive bonus content. 안녕히 가세요. See you next time.